Hi, I'm Tony Larson, and I'm the producer who's currently in the development stage of a documentary on Kratom, with the objective being to show the American people how helpful it is and that it is perfectly safe in an attempt to keep it legal. I'm sitting here with a scientist today, Giulio Ferrari. Thank you so much for joining us. And I asked you to come today because I understand in your clinical work you've worked with Kratom. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I started working with Kratom actually out of personal reasons. I had several car accidents in a very short period of time, which caused a really chronic pain. So I started taking pain pills, and I would go back to the doctor saying, look, my pain is getting worse, and they'd say, well, let's increase your pain pill intake. As a scientist and as a nutritionist, I knew what that was doing to my body. I knew what that was doing to my liver, and the side effects, honestly, in the digestive tract and everything else, were not something that I was wanting, that I wanted to live in for the long term.
Of course.
So I started analyzing and researching other things. What else could I use? And there had to be something out there in nature. And I did find it. I found Kratom, and as any skeptic, I decided to put it under the microscope first to know what I was going to be putting in my body. And I, of course, like anybody else, I read all the hype, all the bad propaganda that's going on over there, and I was a little bit hesitant at first. So that's when I started doing a titration period. And I tried it, and I'll tell you, I do not know. Scientifically, having looked at it, now having been using it daily for 2 years, I have no idea what they're talking about in the media. All that hype, all that negative propaganda, there's no reason for it.
So, thank you. And in your, I understand you're doing some of your postgraduate studies in the Kratom. Has anything, have you seen anything that would indicate any validity to these claims that there's any type of concern, should be any concern when using Kratom?
I have more concern towards coffee than I do Kratom.
Okay.
I think that people spend a lot more time, drink a lot more huge amounts of coffee, venti amounts of coffee, and I think that's more harmful to their bodies than the small amounts of Kratom that they may take daily. And the beautiful thing about Kratom is it has a built-in stopgap. If you take a little too much,
you're going to sleep.
You're done.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't see any way, having tried it on myself, done clinical trials as well on animals, I don't see absolutely any harm if it's taken responsibly.
Fantastic. And okay, so as you know, we called you here to ask you about doing an actual clinical trial, because our objective is to get this removed from the DEA's list, and I understand that that's one of the requirements, or it could be one of the requirements. Talk a little bit about how that would look.
Well, as any clinical trial, I mean, a lot of money is involved, and there are different ways to do trials. In animals first, mice, a lifespan of mice is 2 years, so we would do probably 1 or 2 generations there to start seeing anything. With Kratom, I don't see, having already done certain trials, I don't see anything popping up that we could, I mean, they've been testing GMOs now for 15, 20 years, and they still, all results are still inconclusive. We're not trying to test a drug here to get approved by the FDA.
Correct.
We're testing a plant.
A food.
A food.
Yeah.
It's like saying, okay, we're about to test chamomile. There's not much to test other than making sure that it's not going to have negative effects, especially in the short term.
Awesome. So if we were going to set up a clinical trial and have it, obviously want to have the film as part of this trial, right? Obviously the budget's a big concern. What is the shortest amount of time that we could actually have this trial and still have it be credible in the scientific community?
Well, it's hard to answer with an exactitude, because there's no law out there that says you have to do a 6-month or a 2-year or a 10-year period trial. So I would, in my personal opinion, I would respect a 6-month trial that's done, and especially because, again, we're not trying to get a drug approved by the FDA.
Sure.
We're just trying to test it enough to show that there's no harm, that it's not a nocive drug, that it's not gonna, people won't die from overdose, that people aren't getting hooked to it, and people are not getting a lot of side effects from it. So that's what we're trying to do. It's more of a being able to come to the DEA, not even the FDA, the DEA, and say, look, we've tested it. Here it is. We've tried 100, 200, 1,000 people, and the results were positive. So please have so please base everything you're doing on facts.
Yeah.
Not on gossip, not on media gossip.
Definitely. Or even worse, on what pharmaceutical lobbyists have put in place.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Thank you for telling me that. I was also going to ask you, we've discussed the length, right? How about the cost?
Well, cost can vary greatly if we decide to go human, if we decide to go animal. And in the United States, there are certain very strict regulations on how to do these, and the costs are many times even prohibitive because you don't have a big pharma industry behind you. However, again, we're trying to test a food and not a drug. There are other ways that we can do it for less. For example, going to a South American country like Argentina or Brazil, where the scientific community is as credible as the American, but just because of the sheer value of the dollar there, our dollar would just go further. It would go 2 times, 3 times further over there. So that would be my recommendation, is perhaps even doing the test, initializing at least the clinical trials in South America.
Well, I understand that Brazil is leading the world in oral surgery.
In many things.
Dentist,
many things. Cardiovascular surgery, in stem cell research. There are many leading scientists today that are Brazilians, many that end up coming over here doing postgraduate work at Mount Sinai, at UCLA, in many very respected places, and go back to Brazil and take that technology with them. That's one big discussion our government is having right now, trying to keep those people here. And as soon as you get your master's degree, you get your green card. So these people for the past 40, 50 years have been going back to Brazil and have developed huge institutes over there. Answer your question about the DA, I mean, you got to have somebody over there. You got to. There is no regulation. Unfortunately, they don't say, "Look, the law is you need 1,000 people to try it." There is none of that. It's who's up there. If they decide to take it, we could do a small test, and they say, "Yeah, sure, no problem," because of the political pressure. And we could do 1 million people, and there not be enough political pressure, and them not accept.
So it's got to be a combination of lawyers and lobbyists with a respectable test. And some visual documentation, like a documentary would really just be.
I think so. And I think that if with a small test, with a small clinical test, we can peak enough popular demand. That's
a little bit of leverage.
I think that's even more important, because when people start calling their senators and saying, "Look, dude, I'm not going to vote on you if you don't pass this," or that's where it really makes a huge difference. And then what we're doing is we're not trying to get the final knife to stab the DEA. What we're trying to do is just give them the politicians or the attorneys or the lobbyists the leverage to go there and fight for us, because they need to have tools, and the politicians need to be able to have have something to say. Look, this is why I'm doing it. I'm not just doing it because of hype. They can outlaw something because of hype, but to make it legal, they need to have a little bit of backing.
So we better get that backing there first before they make it or consider making it illegal. A reason why to not make it illegal.
Well, not only illegal, it needs to be removed from the DEA list. It's completely preposterous to be there. There's no reason. There's nothing in those two alkaloids that are even remotely scary to me as a scientist.
And you've analyzed them thoroughly.
Thoroughly, yeah. And they've been analyzed by several other. I mean, I'm not the first one. I don't claim to be the first one, and I'm not the only one. There's several white papers out there. There's several scientists that are out there. There's just not enough media behind it, not enough push behind it. But there's several. If you look at all the white papers, every single one of the researchers or every paper that has been done on Kratom has been positive. There's not one single negative paper on Kratom today.
If you had all of the funds necessary and the full support, what would you do right now in terms of preparing what's necessary, in your opinion, to show the medical community and the DEA about this? Like, from the beginning,
I'd get a clinical trial done, show them, look, we've tested it with these many people, there's no side effects, or these are the possible side effects, just like with coffee, or this is what we have to look for. But the concerns you guys had of it being like heroin, or people not being able to get off of it, or people overdosing on it, are unsubstantiated. Here is our clinical proof, our scientific proof of it, and that would be the first thing I'd do.
Is there anything you can think of why we would want to do it in the U.S. versus somewhere else?
I think that the international community today, the world is truly flat. I mean, the international community of scientists is one. It speaks in unison. Brazil or America, I mean, we're still in the Americas. The standards are pretty much the same.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we're not. I'm not telling us. I'm not saying let's go to China to do this.
Yeah. Good point. I'm not expecting you to have an actual number, but if you could just consider a ballpark, a range possibly. So if we were to do this, say the 6-month trial, how many people would be a requirement to get some sort of actual recognition for a trial?
Well, again, that will vary from scientist to scientist. One may say, well, I won't look at anything under 100, and one may say I won't look at anything under 1,000. It will depend on us having some push politically as well. But I would say that if we can do something with several hundred people, that will be respectable. And if we have somebody who can take this to the DEA and politically have a little bit of push, it will help a lot as well.
How many scientists or MDs would you say would be necessary to have in the operation?
We would probably be talking about a dozen or more. And this is going down in Brazil, and getting highly respected researchers and MDs, as you said, because even though we're not trying to test a drug, we are trying to show that we have a very controlled environment. So a dietitian or a nutritionist, a clinical nutritionist, would be dispensing these and saying, okay, I want to know exactly what you feel. This is the titration period. This is how we're going to do it. And they would record everything that they saw from all the patients that they went through. If we want to do this in a good amount of time, we would have to spread it out within several professionals.
Okay, so we're looking at least, whether it be here, Argentina, or whatnot, we're looking at least 12 medical professionals.
At the very least, yeah.
Okay, would they be working part-time or full-time? Like, could this be done in a couple hours every few days?
Yeah, basically it would just be part of what they're already doing in their offices, and they would decide who would be a good subject to use it or not.
Okay.
So they would take in a percentage of their patients, and instead, in lieu of doing a Vicodin kind of drug, or in lieu of doing a hydrocodone kind of drug, they would then prescribe, or they would dispense Kratom and ask their subject, their patient, to tell us what the difference is, if they like it, what they feel, and so on.
Okay. So we're looking at maybe 6 doctors and 6 nutritionists, something like that, to dispense the food?
We would look at, actually we would try to get a team together the best way possible. I wouldn't make that decision on my own. I would ask them, we'd get our brains together and ask them how they think this would better work?
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do then. Check this out. This is a film budget, and it's just crazy. All the different line items and things that must be paid for. What I'm going to ask you to do before our next discussion is if you could prepare something similar, or maybe we can work on it together, and kind of get a budget, get an outline for how it would look, so I can provide some details to the Kratom community, because I want this to happen. You want it to happen.
Absolutely.
A lot of people want this to happen, and I think it's time we start doing something.
Absolutely.
Before it's taken away from us. So thank you for telling me all about that. You had mentioned you had some personal experience with Kratom.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had to take it because I was in lots of pain, chronic pain, and there was the only thing available to me was hydrocodone or Percocet, and I was just getting more and more and more. There was one point where the doctor said, "Oh no, we can do surgery too, but you're still going to have to be on the pain pills." Mm-hmm. So that's when I went back and started studying this and found out that it worked as well as, or even better, with none of the side effects than the opiates.
Have you ever seen anything that would be alarming to you as a scientist in any of your trials that you've done with Kratom?
Here's my perspective, and let me say, I'm also a Christian minister. I don't drink, I don't smoke. I'm very conservative when it comes to drugs and abuse of thereof. I think that there is a potential for people to abuse air out there. I think that people have, because of anxiety, because of society, people tend to abuse anything that they can get their hands on. And as a clinical nutritionist, I've seen people abusing food. I've seen people abusing chocolate. I've seen people abusing coffee.
Oh yeah.
So
ice cream.
Yeah. I mean,
Facebook.
Hey, yeah, you can abuse anything.
Yeah.
And it's not in. It's all in here.
Yeah.
You know. So with Kratom, I think it's the same thing. The potential of abuse, I think, is perhaps smaller than chocolate, because it's a lot easier for you to overdo chocolate than it is for you to overdo Kratom.
Yeah, for sure, or coffee or something.
Yeah.
I've had the stomach. People say that you may experience some stomach
nausea.
I've never felt that, but with Kratom, I've definitely felt that with coffee.
Yeah. Again, it depends on how much you do, but if you do a little too much and you do feel nausea, you're not going to do any more of it.
Yeah, sure. So we discussed how long the process would, minimum 6 months probably for the clinical, back to the clinical trial. And we discussed how many people would be required and a good amount of subjects. Did you say it would be 200?
I'd say several hundred, so I would put it at a minimum of 200.
So from what you know, what would a range, right, a dollar amount for a study like this to happen in the United States be? How much money would, just not for the film, but just for the clinical trial, how much?
Several hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking about something.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, yeah. In the United States, it would be.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, in the United States, it would be hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially because of all the there's a lot of red tape to go through, and there's a lot of liability in America, and so yeah, it would, and I mean, medical profession here is extremely valued, which it should be, but no doctors are going to do this for free.
How about Canada or Brazil or Argentina or something?
South America, which is what I have my experience with, definitely would be a lot cheaper. I mean, you could probably get something like this done for as little as $100,000. Our dollar, first of all, our dollar goes a lot further down there. It's right now at about 2.5 to 1. And then, you know, prices down there are a lot less expensive than many things. And due to the World Cup and the Olympics being just 2 years from each other, right now the dollar is soaring. Wow. So this is the time to do it. If we wait another couple of years, and a couple of years go by like that, if we wait another couple of years, the dollar's going to go down again, like they've done in the past, 1 to 1, and then Brazilians flood America again. So this is the time. There is an urgency to do it now.
I'm glad you explained it like that. So what would the dollar amount be, let's say, if we were to do it in Brazil?
Well, we can definitely do it with $100,000 and maybe even less. And it all depends on how fast we can get it done and the team that we can get together.
Is there a way to find out ahead of time the minimum criteria for these different elements of the study, like would be respected by the DEA or by the scientists that would actually say, okay, you know, they've used X amount of people over X amount of time and the results are such and such. Is there a way to check this in advance before actually pulling the trigger?
That's a hard question to answer because that will depend on who's up there in power, who makes the decisions. And if we have a lobbyist or if we have somebody that it has that connection to go there and say, look, we're about to do a clinical study, what would you like to see? Perhaps we could answer that question a little closer.
So I wonder if kava extract or kava had to ever...
Kava, from what I understand, kava never went through this amount of scrutiny. It's a very well-known plant for many years, and quite honestly, I see a lot more potential for abuse in kava than I do in kratom, even though it's still less than coffee or cigarettes for that matter. So I'm surprised looking at what kratom really is scientifically, looking at it under that microscope, looking at it from a clinical perspective. I'm highly surprised that it's gotten in the DEA list of alkaloids to watch.
I think the sad thing is that it's found its way into some smoke shops. And I mean, you could take a Coca-Cola Classic and put it next to some bad stuff in the wrong kind of store, and people would start thinking it's gotta be bad. Must be bad, it's in there.
Yeah, some people took the wrong spin to it. Even though I'll tell you one thing, I'm glad it's in those stores. I really am, because it's going to help those people that are hooked on other drugs to get off of them. So they may not know that that's what they're doing. They may go for a legal high, but they will end up with a detoxification.
Yeah, what a good point. Well, hey, thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.